to have Jay Carney giving remarks at the beginning of this. This event actually is one of my favorite events of the White House Correspondents Association weekend, and one of the reasons is the scholarship winners usually have a lot of interesting things to say about journalism and about how they use media and how they read news, and we just had a really interesting session a little while ago where they talked about Twitter and how they get their news, and that is incredibly interesting to all of us who are always trying to stay on top of our game and keep up with changing technology. Another reason that I enjoy this event is that it's a time to talk about journalism. I think sometimes people get caught up in, you know, the red carpet and the movie stars and all of the glamour associated with the dinner, and the dinner is wonderful. But at the core of it really is, you know, journalism and what we do. And we're especially privileged today because we have a panel of journalists who are really the best of the best, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say about what they do. And moderating this panel will be Julie Mason. And Julie and I have worked together since way back when in the Bush administration. And Julie we were talking with the students about multimedia and how we're all having to be multimedia now. And Julie is someone who, covering the White House week for the Houston Chronicle, had a very unique print voice, and then created her blog, a very popular blog. And now she uses that voice in radio, you know, she's got a really interesting program where she interviews a lot of us. Another multitasker here is Jay Carney, who has been on both sides of the fence as a longtime reporter and correspondent covering campaigns and covering the White House. And so we're very privileged to have him here to make some remarks.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm very glad to be here. I chose not to travel with the president today, who's with the First Lady in Georgia at Fort Stewart. Not so I could be with you, although it's a side benefit. My son, who's 10 and a half, is in a baseball league, and his games are on Friday evenings and Sunday afternoons, and I try whenever I can during the spring with the permission of the president, who understands being a father himself, to not travel on Friday if at all possible, so I can catch a baseball game, which I will be doing later today. Very exciting. But one result of that is I can be here to talk with all of you, and both young journalists, to-be, and grizzled veterans here with me. You know, as Karen said, and I appreciate the introduction, I spent most of my life after college as a reporter. I graduated and went right to work for the Miami Herald down in South Florida. Did the kind of things that cub reporters used to do, which is listen to the police radio and chase stories down that way. Wrote a lot of pieces for the Miami Herald, and then because I had the sort of accidental good fortune of studying Russian in college and graduating at the right time, I was a Russian speaker in the late 1980s. Time magazine hired me with the idea of sending me to Moscow because the Soviet Union was becoming a very, very interesting place on the Mikhail Gorbachev. And long story short, I ended up in Moscow for Time magazine during the collapse of the Soviet Union. I came here. After that, covered the first term of Bill Clinton's presidency. Then I covered Congress for a while, which was enormously entertaining. And it was the Gingrich Congress. None of you probably read it now in the history books, but or more recently because Gingrich was running for president. And then the first term of George W. Bush's presidency, covering the White House again. Then moved into management in time. And when I made this decision right after the election in 2008, through serendipity really, to go work for the White House for the vice president initially, I was bureau chief for Time magazine and had been for a number of years here in Washington. And it was a terrific job. I didn't leave journalism because I was looking to leave journalism. I left because my personal feelings about 2008 and the election made me accidental opportunity to go work for this White House, something I couldn't say no to. And it's been an incredible experience. I never would have, 4 years ago, if you'd have said I would have been working in the White House, I would have laughed. I certainly would never have expected to be doing what I'm doing now. I worked for Joe Biden for the first 2 years of this White House as his communications director, and then the president asked me to be his press secretary. And as Mike McCurry, one of my predecessors, called me up to tell me at the time when I was announced, there have been 44 presidents, but now only 29 press secretaries. So it's an even more rarefied field. And that's only because there weren't press secretaries really before last century. So having said that, I think I'm not the first reporter turned press secretary. I think I might be the one who has had the most direct experience covering White Houses, and I think I bring to that, and my colleagues, former colleagues, and now people I work with when I do my job as press secretary can give their opinions of this. But I understand what they're doing. I've been there. I know the pressures. I know the intensity of the competition, and while I think everyone up here almost understands that I get frustrated sometimes with the coverage, I tend to start from a place of some empathy, which is that I think in politics, sometimes if you've only worked in politics and on campaigns and you end up working for somebody in Congress, or if you're fortunate enough, the president, somebody in administration, your view of the media through understandable experience can sometimes be one of total, a completely adversarial view, a completely adversarial relationship. And it's, I think it's, for Republicans, it's often a sacred truth for them that the media is the enemy. For Democrats, it's a little more nuanced than that, but they get to that point eventually. If not the enemy, then an entity that you should be very wary of and is a challenge that must be managed. Now that is all true, but I think that what I do bring, having been on the other side, is an understanding of motivations. And when the story is either wrong or off or just annoying, that for the serious professionals who do their jobs covering the White House or campaigns, it's not because it's agenda driven. It's not a bad story because they're out to get you. You have to make your case and explain why you think it's wrong, why it's why they should see it the way you see it. But I do appreciate that certainly the people here and a good portion of, if not all of the folks who cover the White House come to it with a professional focus and not an advocacy focus. And I respect that a lot, not least because that's the way I tried to do it when I was a reporter. There's a common saying within a very rarefied world that it's not an accident that the press secretary's office in the West Wing is somewhat on a triangle, about halfway between the Oval Office and the briefing room. And it's a very small space if you've never been in the White House. I mean, my office is about 15 paces from the Oval Office and maybe 20 paces from the briefing room. And that symbolizes what a press secretary's job is. I am the principal spokesman for the president. I defend him, I speak for him, I explain him and the administration. But I don't also do that. I try to, in doing that, I and even more than everybody who works in the communications shop and the press shop at the White House, tries to help the journalists who cover the White House do what is a very difficult job. It is a title that is glamorous, White House correspondent, but a job that can sometimes be pretty unpleasant. It's highly competitive. You sit in the booth without sunshine and terrible food. Sometimes the basement floods and where they sit in the adjacent to the briefing room. They spend a lot of time in vans, in motorcades, sitting and waiting, and then fighting to get the story and get it right. And so I know what that's like, and I